In the vast expanse of human thought, our understanding of reality and selfhood has been the subject of inquiry for centuries. From the early philosophers who pondered existence to modern scientists probing the brain's intricacies, the question of how we perceive the world and ourselves continues to evolve. This paper synthesizes three distinct yet interconnected theories: the multiverse of perception theory, perpetual present theory, and inevitable self theory, each exploring a different facet of consciousness, identity, and time. By merging these ideas, we can develop a more cohesive understanding of human experience, where reality, time, and the self converge into a unified framework. Part 1. The Multiverse of Perception, a world of infinite realities, the subjectivity of perception. Human perception is not an objective mirror of reality, but a deeply subjective process. As cognitive scientists like Antonio Damasio and philosophers such as Immanuel Kant suggest, what we perceive is always mediated through the unique lens of our prior experiences, emotions, and neurological processes. This creates a multiverse of perception where each observer constructs their own reality based on their cognitive and emotional framework. Perception, in this sense, is not a passive act, but an active construction of the world. Our brains do not simply process raw data from the environment. Instead, they filter, interpret, and create models of reality. This phenomenon is deeply rooted in neuroscience, where brain structures like the prefrontal cortex, hippocampus, and amygdala collaborate to form a coherent narrative of the world. Imagine two people attending the same event, like a concert. Despite witnessing the same performances, their internal experiences will differ drastically. One may feel joy and exhilaration, while the other may feel bored or anxious. The difference lies not in the external reality, but in how their brain has processed the event, influenced by their personal history and emotional state. The influence of experience and culture. In the context of this theory, experiences serve as a filter through which we interpret reality. As neuroscientist Lisa Feldman Barrett explains, our brains are constantly predicting what will happen based on previous experiences, and this prediction heavily influences our perceptions. This means that no two individuals with their unique experiences and cultural backgrounds can ever perceive the same event in exactly the same way. Culture further complicates this. Shared language and customs provide a collective framework through which we interpret the world, but even within this framework, individual perceptions differ. Consider language. When two people use the word love, they may share a cultural understanding, but the emotional and psychological resonance of that word is entirely personal, informed by their unique experiences of affection, attachment, and loss. Part 2, the perpetual present theory, time as an eternal now, the illusion of linear time. The perpetual present theory challenges the conventional understanding of time as a linear sequence of past, present, and future. Instead, it posits that the only true moment is the present, and our experience of time as a flowing continuum is an illusion created by our brain's memory and anticipatory mechanisms. This idea is echoed in the work of spiritual teachers such as Eckhart Tolle, who in his book states, "Realize deeply that the present moment is all you ever have. Make the now the primary focus of your life." In the context of physics, this theory resonates with Albert Einstein's assertion that the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. According to the theory of relativity, time is not an absolute linear flow, but a flexible dimension that is deeply intertwined with space. What we experience as now is simply the brain's way of organizing our consciousness within a framework of moments. Neuroscience of the present. From a neuroscientific perspective, the brain is constantly engaged in predicting the future and processing the past. Yet consciousness itself is always situated in the present. Studies on working memory and attention by neuroscientists like John Dylan Haynes show that while our brains may process information from the past and anticipate the future, our conscious experience of reality is always anchored in the present moment. The perpetual present theory suggests that our sense of time is a mental construct, a tool for organizing experience rather than an inherent quality of reality. Memory and anticipation give us the illusion of continuity, but consciousness itself is perpetually present. This theory here calls into question the common notion that we are constantly moving from past to future, and instead proposes that all moments are experienced as now, with past and future existing only as mental constructs. Integrating the multiverse of perception. The perpetual present theory naturally integrates with the multiverse of perception theory by positioning every individual's perception within a singular moment of reality, now. This perspective implies that every subjective reality is experienced in the perpetual present, shaped by individual memories of the past and expectations for the future, but always interpreted within the confines of the present. Each moment is, therefore, a multiverse unto itself, where the observer's subjective reality collapses into their personal now. Part 3. The Inevitable Self Theory. Becoming and Predestination. The concept of the inevitable self. The inevitable self theory posits that through the course of our experiences, choices, and unconscious processes, we are constantly becoming our inevitable selves. This theory is grounded in the philosophical ideas of existentialism, particularly the work of Jean-Paul Sartre, who argued that existence precedes essence, that we are not born with a predefined nature, but we define ourselves through our actions and choices. However, this theory takes it a step further by suggesting that despite the apparent openness of our choices, there is an inevitable path we walk due to the accumulation of past choices, experiences, and intrinsic psychological tendencies. In a sense, the inevitable self theory merges the existentialist notion of freedom with a form of soft determinism. While we may feel free in each moment, the weight of our past experiences, traumas, and choices creates an inevitable trajectory for who we are becoming. This process of becoming is not linear, but deeply influenced by unconscious drives, social conditioning, and spiritual inclinations. A person may spend years feeling torn between two career paths, believing they are free to choose. Yet looking back, they may realize that every decision, Every setback and every passion led them inevitably toward a particular path. What seemed like a choice was, in hindsight, an inevitable unfolding of their true self. The role of neuroscience and psychology. Psychologically, this theory finds support in the field of developmental psychology and personality theory. Research by psychologists like Carl Jung suggests that the self is not static, but constantly evolving, shaped by both conscious decisions and unconscious processes. Jung's concept of individuation, the process of becoming one's true self, aligns with the idea of the inevitable self, where through life's challenges, traumas, and insights, we are constantly shaped into who we are meant to be. Neuroscience also supports this theory. Studies on neuroplasticity demonstrate that while the brain can change, it does so in a manner consistent with prior patterns. Neural pathways that have been frequently activated become reinforced over time, making it more likely that we will follow the same behavioral or emotional patterns in the future. In this sense, while we may have the potential for change, we're often bound by the neural structures we have built throughout our lives. Part 4, the synthesis, the multiverse of the self. The unified theory, a multiverse of becoming in the perpetual present. When we combine the multiverse of perception, perpetual present theory, and inevitable self theory, a profound synthesis emerges that offers a new framework for understanding human experience. Each moment of perception is a subjective universe, created and interpreted by the observer in the eternal present. Within this present moment, we are continuously becoming our inevitable selves, shaped by the weight of our past experiences, but always perceiving through the subjective lens of now. The multiverse of the self suggests that each person is a unique universe, with a perception that is always filtered through the present moment, and a self that is always evolving toward an inevitable outcome. However, this inevitability is not predestination in the classical sense. Rather, it is the unfolding of our accumulated choices, experiences, and perceptions, all of which are filtered through the individual's multiverse of perception. Philosophical and spiritual reflections. This synthesis resonates with both philosophical and spiritual traditions. In Buddhism, the concept of no self, anatta, suggests that the self is not a permanent entity, but a constantly changing process, shaped by our perceptions, actions, and karma. The multiverse of the self aligns with this idea, proposing that we are always in a state of becoming, continuously shaped by our subjective realities. Philosophically, the idea of the self as a construct fits with the existentialist view of freedom and choice. Yet, it adds a new dimension by incorporating the inevitability of our trajectory, suggesting that while we are free to make choices, those choices are constrained by the multiverse of perception we inhabit and the psychological patterns we have reinforced over time. Philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, in his work, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, writes, "Become who you are." This statement echoes the essence of the inevitable self theory, which posits that while we seem free in each moment, we are, in a deeper sense, in the process of becoming the person we were always meant to be. Yet Nietzsche's emphasis on active becoming complements the perpetual present theory, suggesting that we become who we are within the ever-present now. The self, therefore, is not fixed, but a constantly evolving process rooted in the subjective experience of each moment. The paradox of freedom and determinism. One of the key insights that emerge from this synthesis is the apparent paradox between freedom and determinism. While the multiverse of perception suggests that each moment is a subjective reality created by the observer, the inevitable self, theory introduces a sense of determinism. Our past experiences, neural pathways, and unconscious drives guide us toward an inevitable trajectory. How can we reconcile this? The answer lies in the understanding that freedom and determinism are not mutually exclusive. At each moment, we experience the world through the lens of our subjective reality, and in that moment, we feel free to make choices. However, those choices are always influenced by the weight of the past, shaping who we are becoming. In this sense, our freedom is bound by our personal history and subjective perception, but we are still free within the confines of that multiverse. As philosopher David Hume wrote, liberty, when opposed to necessity, not to constraint, is the power of acting or not acting, according to the determinations of the will. In the context of the multiverse of the self, our will is shaped by the perceptions and choices we have already made, yet we still act freely in the present moment, as perceived within our subjective reality. The eternal now and the self's unfolding. The perpetual present theory posits that time, as we experience it, is always situated in the now. Our perceptions of past and future are mental constructs, but our consciousness is always rooted in the present. This ties directly into the inevitable self theory, which suggests that the self is always in the process of becoming, unfolding in the present moment. The inevitable self is not a static endpoint, but a dynamic process, constantly being shaped by the interaction between our past and present experiences. In this context, the self is always emerging in the now, guided by the subjective multiverse of our perceptions and the choices we make. The past is not a distant memory, but an active participant in shaping who we are in the present moment. Similarly, the future is not a fixed destiny, but a potential that we move toward, shaped by the decisions we make in the eternal now. In other words, the multiverse of the self is always unfolding, with each present moment representing a new branch of potential realities. Consider the experience of an artist working on a painting. As they add brushstrokes, they are not merely expressing a free and uninhibited vision. They are guided by their past training, emotional state, and unconscious desires. In that moment of creation, they feel free, yet the final product is the inevitable result of everything that has come before. The artist's self is unfolding in the act of creation, shaped by the perpetual present and their inevitable trajectory of becoming. Part 5. Practical Implications and Applications. Mental health and self-understanding. One of the key practical applications of this unified theory lies in the realm of mental health and self-awareness. Many psychological issues stem from a disconnection between the self we believe we are and the self we are becoming. The multiverse of the self offers a framework for understanding this dissonance. By recognizing that our subjective reality is deeply shaped by our perceptions and that we are constantly in a state of becoming, we can better align our choices and actions with our inevitable self. In psychotherapy, this understanding can be powerful. Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT for instance, operates on the premise that changing one's perception can alter emotional and behavioral outcomes. The multiverse of the self takes this a step further, suggesting that by shifting our perception of the present moment, we can actively shape the trajectory of our becoming. Therapies such as solution-focused brief therapy, or SFBT, align with this model, emphasizing the importance of present-focused solutions that guide us toward our ideal self. Carl Jung stated, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." This aligns with the inevitable self theory, suggesting that much of what we consider our fate is driven by unconscious processes. By bringing these processes into conscious awareness, we can take control of our subjective reality and guide our becoming more intentionally. Spiritual and philosophical growth. From a spiritual perspective, the multiverse of the self offers a model for understanding the nature of enlightenment and personal growth. Many spiritual traditions, including Buddhism and Taoism, emphasize the importance of living in the present moment. The perpetual present theory echoes these teachings by proposing that the now is the only true reality. However, the inevitable self theory adds a layer of depth, suggesting that in the present moment, we are not only living, but also becoming. Spiritual growth, therefore, is not just about existing in the now, but about consciously guiding the process of becoming our highest self. In philosophy, this unified theory offers a framework for reconciling existential questions of freedom, choice, and identity. The tension between determinism and free will has long puzzled philosophers. The multiverse of the self suggests that while we are shaped by past experiences and unconscious processes, we are still free to make choices in each moment, guided by the subjective reality we inhabit. This synthesis offers a path for integrating seemingly conflicting views of free will and determinism into a cohesive understanding of human experience. Conclusion: the infinite journey of the self. In this paper, we have explored the synthesis of three powerful theories: the multiverse of perception theory, perpetual present theory, and inevitable self theory, into a unified concept: the multiverse of the self. This theory proposes that each individual's reality is a unique, subjective universe, experienced in the eternal now and shaped by the continuous process of becoming. Our choices, perceptions, and experiences form the architecture of our personal multiverse, with the self constantly evolving toward its inevitable form. Ultimately, the multiverse of the self offers a profound framework for understanding human existence. It challenges us to see ourselves as active participants in the creation of our subjective reality, shaping our perception of the present and our unfolding identity. We are, in essence, both free and determined, free to act within the confines of our subjective reality, but inevitably shaped by the paths we have already walked. This unified theory invites us to live more consciously in the present, to embrace the unfolding process of becoming, and to acknowledge the profound complexity of perception, time, and self. In doing so, we may find a deeper sense of purpose, understanding, and connection to the infinite journey of the self. As the Dalai Lama once said, there is no need for temples, no need for complicated philosophy. Our own brain, our own heart is our temple. The philosophy is kindness. This echoes the simplicity and profundity of the multiverse of the self. We do not need to seek meaning in the external world. It is within us, unfolding with each moment, within the subjective universe of our own perception. Thank you so much if you made it to this point of the video. It really means a lot to me. It also helps the algorithm show my videos to more people. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe, because that also helps me greatly. And I'd love to know what you think of these theories and the unified theory as a whole. Let's have a discussion. Thank you so much for spending some of your time with me. You guys take care, and always remember to question your reality.